Chapter 1. The Boy Who Learned Quiet Power. Michael Peterson Anderson grew up in a house that smelled like dust, old wood, and whatever leftovers his mother could stretch into tomorrow's dinner. Their home sat at the far end of Brookline Street, one of those places kids biked past fast because the porch sagged and the shutters rattled in the wind like loose teeth. He didn't blame them. If he could have biked past his own life, he probably would have. He was 8 when he first understood what being poor really meant, not in an emotional, poetic way, but in the way that makes your stomach twist like a towel being wrung dry. It happened at school. It was picture day. Everyone wore crisp shirts, shiny shoes, hair slicked or braided. Michael wore the same shirt he wore every Monday. His mother had ironed it twice, but no amount of ironing could hide that it was 2 sizes too big and fading at the collar. Tommy Hargrove, blonde, loud, always sticky from candy, pointed across the classroom and yelled, "Why do you dress like it's laundry day every day?" The kids laughed. Not little giggles. Full-bodied, mean laughter that echoed in Michael's ears. He stared down at his sneakers, a pair he found at a garage sale for $3. "My mom says people who don't have money are just lazy," Tommy said loudly, making sure the entire class heard. "She says maybe your parents should try harder." Michael didn't say anything. He didn't trust his voice not to crack. Besides, he already knew something Tommy didn't. Loud people like being listened to, and once you stopped listening, they became powerless. But he didn't fully understand that lesson yet. Not until the day he met Thomas. Michael was 10 the first time he saw the old man sitting on a shattered bench near the busted basketball court behind their apartment complex. Everyone called him Old Man Tom, though his real name was Thomas. It said so on the nameplate on the thick leather briefcase he carried everywhere. Kids said he used to be rich. Others said he had no family. Some whispered rumors that he'd been a banker. But truth moved slowly in poor neighborhoods, and lies spread fast, so nobody knew for sure. Except Michael was curious. "You reading something important?" he asked one afternoon, approaching carefully. Talking to strangers wasn't smart, but talking to lonely old men who looked like they'd fought gravity and lost wasn't particularly dangerous either. The old man looked up, eyebrows rising. "Most things are important if they teach you something," he said. His voice had the gravel of age, but also a sharpness that surprised Michael. "What's your name, boy?" "Michael." "Michael who?" "That depends," he said quietly. Thomas chuckled. "Smart. Never tell your full name to someone you don't trust." Michael shrugged. "You look like someone people trust." "That's because they don't know me." A pause. "And because I don't talk much." Michael sat beside him. It became a habit, almost ritual. Every afternoon after finishing homework, Michael found Thomas on that same bench with a book in one hand and a notebook in the other, scribbling strange symbols and numbers. One day, Michael leaned over. "What's that?" "Compound interest," Thomas replied. "Is that like math?" "It's like math," he said, "but math that makes people rich while they sleep." Michael blinked. "People can make money while sleeping." Thomas closed the notebook. "People who think long-term. People who understand patience. People who don't talk about what they're building until it's built." Silence hung between them, thick, thoughtful. "Want to learn?" Thomas asked. Michael nodded without hesitation. Lessons began the next day. Not formal lessons. Not lectures. Stories. Every story had a moral, but not the kind teachers liked. There was the tale of a loud man who bragged about owning 10 businesses, only for his one debt to collapse all 10 at once. And the story of a warehouse worker who invested a tiny portion of his paycheck every month, quietly, until one day he owned half the land his boss worked on. One was noise, Thomas said. The other was power. Guess which one everyone respected. Michael thought about Tommy Hargrove. "The quiet one," he said. Thomas nodded slowly. "Good. You're learning." He gave Michael a book called The Richest Man in Babylon. The cover was torn. The pages were yellow, but it was the first book Michael ever read twice. Some nights, his mother found him whispering the pages aloud, so he wouldn't forget a single line. "Money grows where attention goes," one chapter said. "Your habits decide your future," another said. But the line that struck him, the one that burrowed into his bones, said, "A wise man shows his wealth slowly, if at all." Michael didn't understand everything, but he felt it deeply. One afternoon, when Michael was 12, he arrived at the court to find Thomas arguing with a man in a suit. A loud man. His voice cut through the air like a saw blade. "You owe me that damn money, old man. You think I won't come collect? I'll take that briefcase if I have to." Michael froze behind the fence. Thomas kept his voice low. "Your anger doesn't change what I owe. It changes what you reveal about yourself." "What the hell does that mean?" "It means," Thomas said calmly, "that you talk too much. And people who talk too much often have the least power." The man lunged forward and grabbed Thomas by the collar. Michael stepped out from behind the fence. "Let him go." The man turned. "Kid, go home." But Michael didn't. "Let him go." The man laughed. "What? You his bodyguard?" "No," Michael said, "but I don't like bullies." A beat passed. The man shoved Thomas away and walked off with a sneer. "You'll get what's coming." When he was gone, Thomas adjusted his collar and sat back down. "You shouldn't have stepped in," he said. "I couldn't just watch." Thomas studied him. "What you saw today, remember it." "Remember what?" "Noise isn't strength. It's insecurity wearing a costume." Michael sat beside him. His heart was still pounding. "Michael," Thomas said quietly, "the world is full of people who think power comes from being loud, from showing off, from convincing others they're unstoppable." He tapped his finger against his chest. "But real power? It's invisible. It's patient. It's the kind that grows underground. By the time people notice it, it's already too late." Michael listened to every word. "Promise me something," Thomas said. "Promise me you'll never try to prove your worth to loud people. Promise me you'll build silently. Let your results speak. And never, ever show your whole hand." Michael swallowed hard. "I promise." He meant it. He didn't know how he would keep that promise. He didn't know what it would turn him into. But he knew one thing clearly even then. He would never speak loudly to feel powerful. He would become powerful so he never needed to speak. And in that moment, under the broken basketball hoop, with an old man's wisdom echoing in his head, Michael made the decision that would shape his entire future. He would never let anyone see his full hand. Chapter 2: The Masked Life of a Quiet Millionaire. Michael Peterson Anderson woke before sunrise. Always had, always would. Old habits from childhood poverty didn't disappear just because your bank account had grown into 7 digits. His apartment wasn't luxurious. It wasn't designed to impress anyone. It was a one-bedroom place on the 3rd floor of a building where the elevator hummed like it was dying and the hallway smelled faintly of someone's forgotten curry. He could have bought a penthouse overlooking the city. He could have built a custom home in the hills. He could have done a lot of things. But he didn't. He boiled water, made cheap instant coffee, and stood by the window watching the streetlights fade into morning. His phone buzzed on the counter. Notification. Dividend payout from Peterson Holdings LLC processed. Amount: $312,450. Michael took a sip of coffee, untouched by the number. "Good month," he muttered to himself, as if the number meant nothing. In truth, it didn't change his routine at all. He dressed simply. Black t-shirt, dark jeans, old sneakers. It was the same look every morning. No watches, no jewelry, no signals of wealth. When he grabbed his keys, the lanyard was frayed, and the car outside was a 2009 Honda Civic whose paint had surrendered to the sun years ago. The driver's side window squeaked when lowering, and the AC only worked when it felt generous. But the engine started, and that was enough. At work, Michael stepped into the office of Dawson Logistics, a mid-sized company where he held the humble job title. Operations Coordinator. Coordinator, not manager, not director. Definitely not anything that hinted at his real financial power. "Morning, Mike," called Jenna from the front desk, twirling a pen. She was friendly, bubbly, but she always spoke to him like he was safe, like he wasn't someone important. He didn't mind. "Morning," he replied. As he walked to his desk, he passed chatter, humming printers, the smell of burnt coffee, coworkers complaining about traffic. Just noise. Normal, everyday noise. At his cubicle, Ryan slid in front of him and smirked. "Bro, you still driving that little tin can Honda?" Ryan asked loudly enough for others to hear. Michael shrugged. "Gets me where I need to go." "I mean, yeah," Ryan said, grinning. "If where you need to go is 2009. Laughter rippled around the office. Michael smiled faintly, not offended, not surprised. People like Ryan always talked loudest. You know, Ryan continued, leaning on Michael's cubicle wall. If you need help financing a newer model, I got a cousin who could hook you up with a deal. Zero down, flexible payments. Helps people with limited budgets. Oh, Michael lifted a brow. Generous of you. Hey man, I look out for the little guys. Michael nodded, keeping his thoughts quiet. Little guys. Sure. If only they knew. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He checked the notification discreetly. Peterson Holdings, LLC. New acquisition complete. Asset value. $4,800,000. Net return projection. 13.6% annually. He locked the phone before anyone could glimpse the screen. Everything okay? Ryan asked. Yeah, Michael said calmly. Just a spam message. Lunch was the same every day. A packed sandwich, fruit, and water. He ate alone on a bench outside, across from a row of food trucks selling meals he could have easily afforded for years. His company's intern, Mark, approached timidly. Hey, Michael, can I sit? Michael gestured beside him. Sure. Mark sank onto the bench, looking overwhelmed. Can I ask you something weird? Michael tilted his head. Go for it. How do you stay so calm? People give you crap all day. Ryan's always making fun of you. Jenna forgets your name half the time. I mean, doesn't it get old? Michael took a sip of water before speaking. People show who they are by how they treat someone they think can't help them, he said softly. I pay attention. Mark blinked. So you're like studying them? In a way. Michael turned his head toward the office windows. You learn a lot when you watch instead of talk. Mark chewed on that thought. I wish I could do that. I feel like I talk too much. Most people do, Michael said. It's not a flaw, just a habit. Do you ever get mad? Mark asked. Like, want to tell everyone off? Michael smiled. No, because their opinions don't change anything real. Mark exhaled. I hope I can get that mindset. You will, Michael said gently, if you practice. He returned to the office after lunch, passing by the break room, where two coworkers whispered, barely making an effort to hide it. That's Michael. The poor guy. One whispered. Yeah, the other replied. He's nice, but definitely not going anywhere in life. Michael didn't react. He simply walked to his desk and continued working. He wasn't angry. He wasn't offended. He wasn't surprised. People underestimated what hid in plain sight. That was their weakness, not his. When the shift ended, the office emptied with the usual end-of-day chatter. Outside, Michael unlocked his Civic, climbed in, and drove off at a steady pace while heavy SUVs overtook him on the freeway. His destination was quiet and unmarked, a simple rental office building with no branding. Suite 216. The door had a single plaque. Peterson Holdings, LLC private office. It wasn't flashy. It was almost intentionally forgettable. Inside, the lighting was warm, the walls lined with monitors showing charts, investment portfolios, and live market data. A single assistant, Nadia, looked up from her desk. Good evening, Mr. Anderson. Evening. She handed him a folder. Acquisition reports, quarterly projections, and your approvals for the renewable energy deal. Thank you. He flipped through the paperwork quickly. Everything clear? Yes. And, sir? She asked hesitantly. Yes. You know you don't have to keep living the way you do. The old car, the tiny apartment, the low-profile job, it's okay to enjoy life. Michael shook his head gently. I don't need other people to know what I have. She swallowed and nodded. Understood. He signed the pages, handed them back, and locked the office behind him. That night, driving home, he passed a group of coworkers exiting a bar. Ryan spotted the Civic and yelled, Hey look, the millionaire's ride. His friends erupted in laughter. One of them added, Dude, I think my lawnmower has more horsepower. Michael rolled past them without a reaction. No honk, no glare, just silence. He parked at his apartment, walked quietly inside, and made himself another cup of instant coffee. The day's noise drifted off him like dust. He sat at the table, breathing slowly, thinking of Thomas's voice from childhood. Real power is invisible. Real power grows quietly. Real power never announces itself. He lived those words every single day, and as the world continued underestimating him, overlooking him, speaking over him. He took careful, mental notes, silently tracking who showed kindness, who showed arrogance, and who showed their true colors when they believed he was nobody. Because one day, though no one knew it yet, those observations would matter. For now, he simply lived the life of a man people thought they understood. A modest car, a modest job title, a modest presence, and beneath it all, hidden in the quiet, a millionaire who never needed anyone to know. Chapter 3: Claire Anderson and the Golden Family. Michael first saw Claire Anderson at a charity book drive held in a renovated warehouse near the river, an event he would never have attended if not for a coworker who guilt-tripped him into volunteering. He was sorting boxes when she walked in, sunlight flooding past her as if the door itself bowed to her presence. She wore a simple white dress, nothing extravagant, but somehow she looked like she belonged in a world where only important things happened. She laughed with volunteers, shook hands with the organizers, and kneeled to help a little girl tie her shoelace. She didn't just look genuine. She felt genuine. Michael watched from a distance, thinking she was exactly the kind of person raised in a life so comfortable she had never learned to fake sincerity. She didn't see him until an organizer called for more boxes. "Could someone help with these?" the man shouted. Michael lifted two at once. Claire reached for the top of the stack. "I'll take that one," she said with a bright smile. He blinked. "Oh, sure." Their hands brushed for half a second, and she smiled again, this time softer. "I'm Claire." "Michael. You volunteer here often?" "No," he admitted. "First time." "Me too," she whispered, leaning closer conspiratorially. "I'm trying to look useful, but I have no idea what I'm doing." He chuckled. "Same. I was handed a box and told to look busy. That's exactly what I'm doing." They shared a quick laugh, easy, natural warmth. That was the moment he fell just a little bit. They talked for an hour over boxed lunches. She listened when he spoke. She asked questions without judgment. She didn't flinch when he mentioned his childhood or his modest job. "Your story's real," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "People don't talk like that anymore." "And how do people talk now?" he asked. "With filters," she sighed. "With pretend confidence, pretend problems, pretend emotions. Everything's for show." "And you?" "I grew up in show," she admitted. "But I've been trying to escape it." He didn't fully understand what she meant. Not yet. But he wanted to. They began seeing each other, not heightened romance, not dramatic declarations. Just slow afternoons, small dinners, late-night conversations. Claire never flaunted wealth, never looked down on his old Honda, never seemed to mind his simple apartment. The first time he visited her home, he realized why. It wasn't a home. It was a display. The Anderson estate stretched across manicured lawns, stone fountains, and glass walls reflecting perfect landscaping. Inside, the floors were polished so smooth he could see his reflection in them. Art pieces lined the corridors, abstract shapes in gold frames, likely more expensive than everything he owned combined. Claire tugged his hand gently. "Ignore all this." "How?" he whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Not when her father swept into the room like a gust of cold wind. Richard Anderson. Sharp suit. Sharper eyes. "So," Richard said, looking Michael up and down, "this is the one you're dating." Claire squeezed his arm. "Dad, this is Michael." "A pleasure," Michael offered. Richard didn't take his hand. "What do you do?" Richard asked, already disinterested. "I work in operations, so not management." "Not currently." Richard nodded slowly. "I see." Claire winced at her father's tone. "Dad, it's fine," Michael whispered. But it wasn't fine. It was the beginning. They married quietly. Claire insisted she didn't want to show, and Michael believed her. A small ceremony at a lakeside cabin, 20 people, soft music, handwritten vows. For a while, Michael believed he had escaped the world Claire resented. He was wrong, because marriage didn't just join two people. It tied him to an entire dynasty. The first event he attended as Claire Anderson's husband was a formal dinner celebrating one of her father's business partnerships. The guests glittered with designer labels. The air smelled like expensive perfume and backhanded compliments. When Claire introduced him to her friends, their smiles were too wide, too polished. "Oh, this is Michael," said Tiffany Simmons, adjusting her diamond bracelet. Claire told us you're in operations. How cute. Michael nodded politely. Nice to meet you. You must be so exhausted, Tiffany added dramatically. Working a normal job must be so hard. Claire laughed, not cruelly, but not defensively either. More like she was used to laughing along to survive the circle. Michael waited for her to say something, anything. She didn't. Her friend Laura leaned in. Claire, remember that guy in college who worked at Starbucks? You always attract the humble types. Claire rolled her eyes jokingly. Stop. Michael smiled tightly. When the women walked ahead, Laura whispered not so softly. He's cute, but he looks budget. Tiffany giggled. Maybe it's his thing. Some women like charity projects. Michael pretended he didn't hear. Claire said nothing anyway. At Sunday brunches, Richard interrogated him about salary, career potential, ambition. You don't want to be stuck in a small job forever, do you? Richard asked. I like what I do, Michael replied. Richard smirked. Yes, but liking it doesn't make it respectable. Claire nudged her father. Dad, stop. But she didn't tell him he was wrong. He noticed that. He noticed everything. 5 years passed like this. Tiny cuts, subtle dismissals, occasional kindnesses overshadowed by layers of unspoken contempt. Michael didn't fight. He didn't argue. He didn't correct anyone who assumed he needed Claire's money or her father's favors. He simply observed. At dinners, her friends teased him about not knowing vintage wines or designer brands. Michael, do you even know the difference between a Merlot and a Cab? One joked. No, he said calmly, but I know how to enjoy a drink. Claire's laugh blended in with theirs. She never said stop. She never defended him. She never pulled his hand under the table and whispered, ignore them. She simply blended into the world she told him she hated. Michael learned something important in those 5 years. He was not accepted. He was tolerated. Not because he was unworthy, but because they assumed he had nothing to offer. To the Andersons, he was the humble background character, the man who married into wealth but didn't belong to it. To Claire's friends, he was the cute, small-town boy who worked hard and still earned nothing impressive. And Claire? She didn't mock him. She didn't humiliate him. She didn't disrespect him. She simply stood quietly beside the people who did. Her silence was the loudest part, and as Michael sat across from her one evening at a formal dinner, watching her laugh with friends while he picked an overpriced plate, he realized something with absolute clarity. He was living in her world, but she was never willing to live in his. 5 years of smiles. 5 years of politeness. 5 years of pretending he didn't notice the hierarchy. 5 years of being tolerated, not accepted. Chapter 4. The Dinner That Broke the Marriage. Michael had survived 5 years of the Andersons' subtle cuts, smirks, and honey-laced insults. He told himself he could endure it because he loved Claire, because he believed she would eventually stand between him and her family instead of sitting beside them. But tonight was different. Tonight, he felt something inside him crack. The Andersons were hosting one of their family business dinners, the kind where everyone pretended to be relaxed while wearing clothes so stiff they could have stood on their own. Michael arrived in his simple dark blazer while the others sparkled with designer labels. You could practically hear the price tags screaming for attention. Richard Anderson, the patriarch, greeted him with the usual half-amused, half-bored smile. Michael, Richard said, clapping him once on the shoulder. Good to see you. Claire said you were busy with your, job. The pause lingered just long enough to be insulting. Michael smiled politely. Yes, sir. I was. Richard didn't notice the tightness in Michael's jaw. Or maybe he did and simply didn't care. They sat around the long walnut table, Claire beside him, scrolling through her phone under the tablecloth when she thought no one could see. Her mother, Patricia, wore pearls big enough to bruise someone if they fell on her. Her brother, Luke, who had failed upward into a cushy executive role simply by existing, leaned back in his chair like he was bored by gravity. Dinner was served, steak, asparagus, truffle potatoes, a spread worth more than some people earned in a week. And as always, everyone talked loudly about deals and contacts and yachts. Michael listened quietly. He always did. But this time, he had come prepared for something else. Something honest. When Richard finished bragging about a new supplier contract, Michael cleared his throat gently. Actually, Michael said, "I wanted to talk to you about something." 6 heads turned. Richard raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you have news for us?" Michael nodded, calm. "Yes. I've been reviewing your quarterly reports. Anderson Holdings could stabilize its expansion with an additional capital injection. I'd like to help." Silence. Then Luke's eyebrows shot up like he'd just heard a toddler say he wanted to buy a spaceship. "You want to help?" Luke echoed, smirking. "Yes," Michael said evenly. "I'm offering a $300,000 investment." Patricia's fork froze midair. Richard blinked twice. Claire slowly turned her head toward Michael like she hadn't heard him correctly. "300,000?" Richard asked, voice rising with disbelief. Michael nodded humbly. "Yes, I know it may not be life-changing for the company, but it could help your expansion." Richard's laugh cut him off. Not a chuckle, not a polite laugh. A full, booming belly laugh that made his face red. "Oh my God," Richard wheezed, wiping tears from his eyes. 300,000? Michael, that's pocket change compared to the deals we handle." Patricia let out a soft laugh behind her hand. Luke openly snorted. "Bro, that's like 2 payroll cycles." And then Michael turned his head and saw Claire. She wasn't embarrassed for them. She wasn't hurt for him. She wasn't defending him. She was smirking with them, as if she'd been waiting for this moment, the moment her father mocked her husband, to align herself with them instead of him. Something cold slid through Michael's chest, but he kept his face blank. Richard continued, tone dripping with condescension. "Michael, listen. I appreciate the gesture, but let's be realistic. This is a $50 million company. We don't operate with charity donations." Michael's fingers tightened around his fork, knuckles whitening. He swallowed back the flare of humiliation burning in his throat. Claire finally spoke. "Dad's right, Michael. You don't need to pretend. We're not expecting you to contribute. Pretend." That word hit harder than Richard's laughter. Michael looked at her, waiting, hoping for her to realize what she'd said. She didn't. Instead, she sipped her wine, unconcerned. He felt something break, not loudly but quietly, like a wire snapping deep inside machinery where no one could see. Michael forced his voice steady. "It wasn't charity. It was a genuine offer. I wanted to support the family." Richard waved a dismissive hand. "Well, keep your money, son. You'll need it more than we will." The table laughed again. Even Claire. Michael didn't. He set his fork down neatly, wiped his hands with his napkin, and slowly reached for his phone under the table. No one noticed. They were too busy celebrating Richard's cleverness. The conversation moved on, drowning him out, talking numbers, upcoming expansions, projected profits, and all the things Anderson Holdings believed they were conquering. They didn't know. They had no idea. Peterson Holdings LLC, his quiet, unseen, unassuming investment entity, had been slowly becoming one of their largest backers over the last 4 years. Silent capital, invisible contracts, indirect channels. He structured it that way on purpose. To stay invisible. To stay underestimated. He opened a private message to his investment manager. 3 words were all he typed. "Withdraw all backing." He hit send. A faint vibration confirmed delivery. 10 minutes from now, an emergency board meeting would be called. The Andersons would panic. Contract would freeze. Liquidity would dry. Credit would question. All from the pocket change son-in-law they loved to mock. But they didn't notice the storm he'd just unleashed. Not yet. Because when Michael put his phone back down, he didn't smirk. He didn't gloat. He didn't burn with anger. He felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. Richard raised his glass, still chuckling. To family and success. Everyone clinked their glasses. Michael lifted his last. Not in celebration. In farewell. He knew what this moment meant. He knew what had snapped inside him wasn't reparable. He had come with sincerity. He had offered help. He had been laughed at, belittled, dismissed, and mocked in front of the woman who vowed to stand beside him. And she smirked. That was the part he would never forget. He took a slow sip of his drink. Around him, the Anderson family kept talking, oblivious, loud, arrogant. They had no idea the ground beneath their empire was already shifting. But Michael's heart was already done. Completely, finally done. And the dinner, the humiliating, mocking, dismissive dinner, had broken the final piece of his marriage. In Chapter 4. Chapter 5, the text that destroyed a $50 million empire. Michael didn't leave the Anderson dining room angry. Angry would have meant he still cared. He stepped out of the room quietly, politely, even offering Patricia a small nod as he excused himself. "I just need some air," he murmured. None of them looked twice. They were too busy laughing at a joke Luke made about Broke's sons-in-law playing investor. He walked down the hallway, each step echoing against the marble floors, past the framed photos of the Anderson family, vacations on yachts, expensive ski trips, fundraisers where they pretended to care about the people they stepped on. Photos Michael wasn't in. Claire had once said, "You don't really fit the aesthetic of the family wall, babe." Tonight made sense of that sentence. When he reached the front door, he let it shut gently behind him. The cold night air wrapped around him like a long-waiting friend. He inhaled deeply, the first real breath he'd taken all evening. The Anderson estate sat atop a small hill, glittering with pretentious garden lights as though trying too hard to be a palace. Michael walked down the steps slowly, hands in his pockets, processing the moment that had just unfolded inside. His wife smirked. That was the echo replaying in his head. Not Richard's laugh, not Luke's snort, not Patricia's polite fake chuckle. It was Claire joining in, not defending him, not even looking conflicted. She smirked, just like them. Michael reached the end of the long driveway, where the soft hum of crickets replaced the noise of arrogance. He leaned against the stone pillar at the gate, pulled out his phone, and unlocked it with a calmness that felt almost unreal. His investment manager, Daniel, had sent him 2 messages earlier. "Everything's still on track for Anderson Holdings. Need confirmation before we finalize the Q4 backing." Michael looked at the screen for a long moment. His thumb hovered. He replayed Richard's voice in his head. 300,000? That's pocket change. He replayed Claire's voice. "Michael, you don't need to pretend." They had no idea the man they mocked at dinner was the reason their lights were still on. The reason their flashy expansions didn't collapse last year. The reason Anderson Holdings hadn't already been eaten alive by competitors. They had been protected by the man they mistreated. Silently, faithfully, patiently. Until tonight. Michael tapped out 3 words. "Withdraw all backing." He paused, then added, "Immediately." He pressed send. A tiny delivered popped up within seconds, simple, unimpressive, harmless on the surface. But inside that message was a loaded weapon. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and breathed out, watching the vapor drift into the cold night air. Behind him, through the house windows, he could hear faint laughter still. Oblivious, carefree, clueless. He didn't stay to listen. He didn't need to, because 30 seconds later, his phone buzzed. Daniel responded instantly, as Michael knew he would. "Daniel, are you certain? Pulling out completely will trigger their debt covenants. They'll default tonight." "Michael, do it." Another buzz. "Daniel, understood. I'll initiate the recall. Brace yourself. They're going to blow up your phone when they realize you were their main silent backer." Michael stared at the screen for a moment. He typed back slowly. "Michael, they won't call me. They don't think I matter." Daniel's reply came fast. "Daniel, they're about to learn the truth." Michael put the phone away. He didn't need to check again to know what was happening on the other end. He had designed Peterson Holdings for this exact type of invisible intervention. Lines of capital structured through complex channels, layered investment entities, and quiet majority influence that never used his name. Not once had Anderson Holdings considered that Peterson Holdings LLC, their dependable saver, belonged to the man they mocked for being average. A distant hum of engines filled the night. 2 black SUVs approached from the lower road. Not security, not police. Board members, executives, pulled from their fancy dinners, forced into emergency mode. Michael recognized the first man stepping out of the SUV, Howard Chun, the CFO. Normally calm, normally ice cold. Not tonight. Howard walked fast, talking into his phone, his voice a frantic hiss. "No, we don't have liquidity anymore. I'm telling you, Peterson pulled everything. We're exposed. Call Richard now, get him now." Michael watched from the shadows beneath a tall oak tree. He didn't hide out of fear. He hid because he wanted to see the moment their arrogance collided with reality. Inside the house, lights began flashing. Staff hurried. Voices rose. Chairs scraped against the floor. The once cheerful dining room transformed into a war zone within minutes. Howard nearly ran into the foyer. The front door slammed open. "Richard," Howard's voice cracked. "You need to come right now." The laughter inside stopped instantly. Michael heard Richard's irritated voice. "Howard, what the hell?" "They withdrew," Howard gasped. "All of it. Every cent." Silence. Then Richard. "Who withdrew?" "Peterson Holdings." Howard exploded. "All funding. That's 32% of our liquidity. We're going to default on the First Capital loan tonight. Do you understand what that means?" There was scrambling, cursing. Someone knocked over a glass. It shattered. Claire's voice finally floated out, sharp and anxious. "Dad, what's happening?" Richard barked back. "We just lost our largest silent investor." Luke shouted, "Call them back. Tell them we'll renegotiate." Howard snapped, "I can't. Their decision is final. They sent legal documents. It's over." Michael leaned his head against the tree trunk and closed his eyes for a moment. Not in joy, not in revenge, in closure. This wasn't payback. This was truth correcting itself. The Andersons had believed power was loud, glittering, arrogant. They never understood the kind born in silence, the kind Michael had learned from poverty, humiliation, and hard-earned discipline. Quiet power doesn't shout. Quiet power doesn't ask for respect. Quiet power simply moves, and the world shifts whether anyone notices or not. Tonight, it shifted beneath a $50 million empire built on pretentiousness and entitlement. And it all began with a single text. Michael heard Richard inside the house again, panicking louder. "Get everyone to the office. Emergency meeting now. We need every executive. I don't care what time it is." Chairs scraped. Doors slammed. Stress radiated through every window. Claire's voice rose, frantic. "What do we do? Dad, what do we do?" Richard snapped. "Pray Peterson reverses the decision. Otherwise, we're finished." Michael pushed off the tree trunk. He slid his hands back into his pockets, and he walked calmly, quietly, down the driveway toward his car. Behind him, a once arrogant empire was spiraling into chaos. All because the man they mocked finally stopped protecting them. Chapter 6. Panic in the Anderson family. Michael didn't rush when he got into his car. He sat there for a moment, letting the leather seat embrace him. The cold night air seeped through the cracked window, carrying a faint scent of pine. He took one slow breath. Then his phone began vibrating. Once, twice, then continuously, an angry swarm of calls lighting up the screen. Richard Anderson, 7 missed calls Claire, from missed calls Patricia Anderson, 2 missed calls unknown, probably Luke. 3 missed calls he watched the screen light up, then fade. Light up, fade. There was a strange calmness inside him, a clarity that felt almost serene. He started the engine and drove off the estate slowly, headlights gliding across the tall iron gates that always made him feel like an outsider entering someone else's kingdom. Not tonight. Tonight he left as the man who quietly owned the kingdom's foundations and pulled them out. As he reached the main road, the phone buzzed again. This time, he answered on speaker, without speaking, just silence. He let them speak first. Claire's voice burst through the speaker, frantic, trembling, nothing like the woman who smugly laughed beside her father an hour earlier. "Michael, Michael, are you there? Oh my God, please, please answer. We need to talk. You need to stop this. Please." He said nothing. Her breath hitched, and she continued, voice cracking. I don't know what happened, but everyone is panicking. Peterson Holdings pulled out everything. Dad is losing it. They're saying the company will collapse. I know you're upset from earlier, but you can't just do this." Her desperation filled the car. Still, he drove quietly, watching the road, letting her words spill out until she ran out of breath. Finally, when she whispered a soft, broken, "Michael," he spoke. Calm, measured. "Why do you care?" Claire stopped. "What? Why do you suddenly care what I do?" he repeated. Michael, this is serious." "My family, yes," he said, voice low. "Your family. Your image, your wealth, your comfort, your reputation. That's not fair, but it's accurate. She fell silent. Michael let the quiet stretch until she fidgeted on the other end. He could hear voices behind her, Richard shouting orders, Patricia crying, people running back and forth, phones ringing. Chaos. Michael, Claire whispered, trying to regain some composure. I don't understand why you're doing this. You're not this kind of person. He almost laughed. Not out of humor, out of disbelief. You don't know what kind of person I am, he said. You never bothered to learn. Her breath caught. Of course I know, really, he cut in, sharp but controlled. Then tell me, Claire, what's my grandmother's name? The line went silent. He could picture her face, eyes widening, mouth opening, searching empty air for an answer that wasn't there. He continued, what's my favorite book? Nothing. What city was I born in? Silence. What was the name of the mentor who helped me learn finance? The man who changed my life? Silence. What's my best friend's name? My real best friend, not the people you think are nice to have around. Her breathing grew uneven. Michael, this isn't. He didn't let her finish. You've been married to me for 5 years, Claire. 5 years. And you don't know a single answer. His voice hardened. Not one. She made a choking sound, something between a sob and a gasp. That's not how it is, but I know everything about you, he said quietly. Your favorite wine, your preferred flowers, the music you play when you're overwhelmed, the way you soften your voice when you want something from your father, the exact number of freckles on your left shoulder. I paid attention. I cared. She sniffed hard. I care too, no, he said. You care about what I provide, not who I am. There was a scuffle on her end, voices rising. Richard grabbed the phone. Michael, what the hell have you done? Michael didn't respond. You think this is funny? You think this is some kind of joke? Richard barked. You better call your people and reverse this. Now, do you hear me? Michael watched the road stretch ahead. Streetlights passed slowly through the windshield. I don't work for you, Richard. You're married to my daughter, and you treated me like a stray dog she picked up. Richard sputtered. You're overreacting, Michael continued, calm as ever. You insulted me. You belittled me. You dismissed everything I offered. Tonight was just the clearest version of how you've always seen me. Richard's tone shifted, anger turning into panic. If you pull out your funding, we lose everything. You assumed I had nothing to pull. Richard had no comeback. Michael added, you never respected me. You never even tried. There was heavy breathing on the line. Then Claire's voice came back, softer, shakier. Michael, please. Please. I'm begging you. I know things haven't been perfect, but don't do this. Don't destroy my family. He stopped at a red light, the glow washing across his face. Claire, he said slowly, your family destroyed any chance we had of being real a long time ago. She sobbed. Just talk to me. Please come home. We can fix this. I'll leave dinner right now. I'll meet you anywhere you want. I'll do anything you ask. To stop this. Michael stared at the red light, unblinking. You want to fix this because you're afraid of losing your empire, he said. Not because you're afraid of losing me. No, she cried. That's not true. Name one thing you know about who I am, he said softly. Not my income. Not what I've given you. Not the role I played. One thing. Silence. He could hear her trying to find an answer. Any answer, but the truth towered over her. She didn't know him, because she never cared to. The light turned green. He eased the car forward. You lost me long before you lost Peterson Holdings, he said, voice steady. Tonight just made it obvious. Claire let out a trembling sob. Please, Michael, please don't do this. He closed his eyes. Goodbye, Claire. And he hung up. For the first time in 5 years, the silence after her voice felt peaceful. Behind him, the Anderson family spiraled deeper into panic, scrambling, calling, begging, but none of it mattered now, because the man they ignored for years had finally stopped listening. Chapter 7, The Legal War. The lawsuit came faster than Michael expected. 3 days after the Anderson empire began to implode, after midnight emails from panicked executives and frantic restructuring attempts, after Richard personally tried calling him 22 times, the envelope arrived on Michael's doorstep. A thick, cream-colored packet stamped with, Anderson Holdings ETAL V. Michael Peterson Anderson, he opened it without flinching. Inside, accusations dripping with desperation, bad faith withdrawal, intentional sabotage, emotional manipulation of spouse to inflict financial harm, malicious interference with a family business. They even requested an emergency injunction to force him to restore his investments. Michael read every page carefully, methodically. Then he set the packet aside, brewed a calm cup of black tea, and sat at his dining table as if reviewing a regular financial report. He didn't panic. He didn't pace. He had expected this. The Andersons were not people who accepted consequences. They redirected blame. Loudly, he dialed his attorney. "Good morning, Jonathan." On the other end, his lawyer's tired voice answered. "Michael, I assume you've received the packet." "Yes." A sigh. "They're throwing everything. They're claiming you emotionally coerced the family into making business decisions. They even attached witness statements from Claire and Richard." Michael leaned back. The game had begun. "Prepare a response," he said, "and schedule whatever the court needs." Jonathan hesitated. "Are you sure you want to fight this? We can negotiate." "No," Michael said quietly. "We're not negotiating who I am. Not anymore." The courtroom. 2 weeks later, the courtroom brimmed with tension. Rows of reporters whispered, waiting for a dramatic showdown. The entire Anderson family sat together, expensive suits, rigid posture, looking like royalty forced to sit among commoners. Richard scowled, hands clasped tight. Patricia looked exhausted, her makeup unable to hide her stress. Claire kept her eyes forward, not once glancing at Michael. She looked thinner, more fragile, but her chin stayed raised. Their attorney, a polished corporate bulldog named Harris, whispered instructions between them. Michael entered quietly, alone except for Jonathan. As he walked down the aisle, whispers rippled. "That's him. That's the guy who pulled the plug. He's not what I imagined." He took his seat, straightening his tie. Nothing flashy, just a simple Navy piece. Quiet wealth rarely dressed loudly. Opening shots. Judge Ellington, a firm woman in her 50s, glanced over the file. "Let's begin. Counsel for the plaintiffs." Harris rose dramatically, as though performing for cameras. "Your Honor, the Anderson family has suffered catastrophic losses due to the defendant's abrupt, malicious withdrawal of funding. This was not a business decision. This was revenge." He jabbed a finger toward Michael. "This man intentionally weaponized his marriage to destroy a family business worth $50 million. The gallery murmured. Harris continued. "Furthermore, he hid his true financial power from his wife, misled her emotionally, and acted in blatant bad faith. We request the court compel him to reinstate his funds immediately." Richard nodded aggressively at each line. Claire sat stiffly, hands locked together, staring at the table. Judge Ellington turned to Jonathan. "Defense." Jonathan rose calmly. "Your Honor, Peterson Holdings had a fully legal, at-will investment agreement. The defendant's actions were lawful. He filed all required notices. The plaintiffs assumed the silent investor was a faceless corporation. They never once reached out to understand Peterson Holdings or its principles. They simply grew dependent." He paused. "As for emotional manipulation, we have evidence quite to the contrary." He sat. The judge leaned forward. "I will hear testimony." Richard takes the stand. Richard marched up like a king approaching a throne. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore in, and sat with his chin high. Harris started. "Mr. Anderson, explain the impact of the defendant's actions." Richard leaned to the microphone dramatically. "Impact? He destroyed us. Overnight. He pulled the rug from under our feet because he was upset about a minor disagreement at dinner. He used money, hidden money, to punish us." He pointed toward Michael. "This man pretended to be poor. He lied about who he was. He married my daughter under false pretenses." Murmurs again. Jonathan stood. "Your Honor, cross-examination." Richard tensed. Jonathan approached calmly. "Mr. Anderson, did the defendant ever state he was poor?" "Well, but he acted like..." "Did you ever ask him about his finances directly?" "No, but did you ever research Peterson Holdings before taking their millions in funding?" Richard blinked. We trusted them. Exactly, Jonathan said. You accepted tens of millions without due diligence. Is that Peterson Holdings' fault or your negligence? Richard stammered. No further questions. Claire takes the stand. When she took the stand, she avoided looking at Michael. Her voice was soft. Michael never told me he was rich. He let me believe my family supported us more. And when he withdrew funding, he didn't warn me. He didn't warn any of us. He could have talked to me first. Harris nodded sympathetically. And how did that make you feel? She swallowed hard. Used. Hurt. Blindsided. Jonathan stood. Mrs. Anderson, may I ask some questions? She nodded stiffly. Did you ever ask your husband about his financial background? A pause. No. Did you ever show interest in his upbringing? Silence. Jonathan continued gently. Can you name his grandmother's name? Claire visibly tensed. No. What about his favorite book? She closed her eyes for a moment. I don't know. His best friend? Tears brimmed, but she refused to let them fall. No. Do you believe you knew your husband? Her voice trembled. I thought I did. No further questions. Claire stepped down quickly, wiping her eyes as she returned to her seat. Michael takes the stand. When Michael walked to the witness stand, the courtroom quieted completely. He swore in, sat, and placed his hands calmly in his lap. Jonathan asked the first question. Michael, why did you hide your wealth? Michael spoke evenly, without bitterness. I grew up poor. People treated me based on what they saw, not who I was. When I started making money, I realized people change when they think you're rich. They treat you differently. Not better, just differently. He continued. So I built a life where I could watch how people behaved without knowing what I had. I lived modestly because I wanted sincerity, not performance. Jonathan nodded. And why your marriage? Michael exhaled carefully. I love Claire. I wanted to know if she loved me for the person I was before money. I wanted to see if her family saw me as part of them, or just an accessory. He didn't look at Claire while saying it. In your investment withdrawal, I acted within my legal rights. Peterson Holdings had an at-will agreement. I did nothing illegal. The Andersons assumed I had no power. They assumed they were untouchable. He paused. I just stopped protecting them. Jonathan nodded. Thank you. Harris stormed up for cross-examination. You destroyed a family empire because your feelings were hurt. Michael looked at him evenly. No, I withdrew an investment because I no longer trusted the people who benefited from it. Harris jabbed a finger. You blindsided your wife. Michael's voice softened. She never saw me, not for who I really was. Harris froze. He had nothing left. The judge rules. Judge Ellington leaned back, steepling her fingers. She scanned the documents, the testimonies, the contracts. Finally, she spoke. After reviewing all presented evidence, it is clear the defendant acted within his contractual rights. There is no proof of coercion, manipulation, or illegal intention. Richard's face collapsed. The motion to compel reinstatement of funds is hereby denied. Claire's hand flew to her mouth, and the court finds in favor of the defendant. A gavel struck. Michael closed his eyes, not in triumph, in release. Chapter 8, Divorce and Walking Away from Millions. Michael had always imagined that when his marriage ended, if it ever did, there would be shouting, chaos, maybe a dramatic scene that echoed the pain of the past 5 years. But the real ending was quiet, cold, almost surgical. The morning after the legal victory, he sat alone in his study, the sun barely rising, casting long gold stripes across the hardwood floor. His phone buzzed nonstop on the desk, vibrating in short, frantic bursts. Claire, Claire, Claire. He didn't open a single one. Instead, he slid the divorce packet across the desk to his attorney, a sharp, composed woman named Lydia March, who had the kind of aura that made judges straighten their robes and opposing counsel rethink their arguments. She flipped through the stack with brisk efficiency. You're certain about this number? Positive, Michael replied. You understand this means you'll walk away from up to $26 million. Potentially more, depending on future valuations. That's the point, he said quietly. I want to walk away. Lydia paused. Most men would fight, at least negotiate, try to leverage the current chaos. Michael gave a faint, humorless smile. "I spent 5 years being measured by the wrong metrics. I'm done fighting for scraps of respect." Lydia nodded, her expression softening just a little. "Then I'll finalize this today." By afternoon, the Anderson family had realized he wasn't bluffing. Claire stormed into the lobby of the law office, hair frazzled, sunglasses crooked, looking like she hadn't slept a minute. When the receptionist told her Michael was in a meeting, she slammed her palm on the desk. "I'm his wife. I don't need an appointment." Michael, hearing the commotion, stepped into the hall. Claire spun toward him, fury melting into desperation. "Michael, please, can we talk?" Her voice cracked at the end, not broken from love, just fear. Fear of losing the last safety net her family had left. Michael held the door open, but didn't invite her in. She took the hint and stayed in the hallway, wringing her hands. "Michael, this divorce, this whole thing, it doesn't have to be like this. The media is ripping the company apart. Dad's having panic attacks. Mom won't leave her room. You can fix this." "I didn't break it," he replied calmly, "and I'm not here to patch it back together." "You're punishing us," she whispered. "You punished me for 5 years. I just stopped letting it happen." Claire flinched like he'd struck her. She tried again, softer this time. I didn't know. About Peterson Holdings. About any of it. If I knew, that's exactly the problem." Michael's voice stayed steady. "If you knew I was wealthy, you would have treated me better. Your family, too. That tells me everything." Claire looked like she was about to argue, then stopped, defeated. "Are you really giving up all this money?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "But why?" "It's yours." Michael looked her directly in the eyes. "Because I want my life back." She swallowed hard, the reality sinking in. She wasn't going to win him back. Not with tears, guilt, nor desperation. "Michael," she whispered one last time, "is there anything I can do?" "Yes," he said. "Sign the papers." Her eyes glistened, but she nodded slowly. 2 days later, the divorce hit the courts. The filings were sealed, but nothing stayed hidden for long, especially not in a media frenzy surrounding a collapsing empire. By breakfast, the headlines were everywhere. "Quiet husband secretly funded Anderson empire." "Anonymous investor revealed as family son-in-law." "Anderson Holdings falls as hidden benefactor pulls out." Michael Reynolds walks away from $26 million divorce settlement. Paparazzi camped outside his modest suburban home, confused how a man with such financial influence lived in a house barely larger than a cottage compared to the Anderson mansion. A reporter yelled over a hedge as Michael stepped out to get his mail. "Mr. Reynolds, is it true you funded nearly 40% of Anderson Holdings? Did your wife know?" Michael ignored them, retrieved the mail, and walked back inside without a glance. He lived 30 years learning how to be invisible. He wasn't about to start performing now. Meanwhile, the Anderson estate had become a war zone. Richard shouted into phones. Board members shouted back. Lawyers demanded answers. Investors threatened to sue. Employees leaked internal chaos to journalists. The value of the company plummeted every hour. Claire sat in her childhood bedroom, mascara smeared, scrolling through article after article. Every headline named Michael. Every article painted him not as the simple, unremarkable husband they once mocked, but as a financial strategist who played the long game better than any of them. At dinner that night, Richard slammed a newspaper onto the table. "Do you see this? Do you see what he's done to us?" he barked. Claire barely whispered. "He didn't do anything. We did." Richard froze. "Excuse me. We treated him like he was nothing," she said, voice trembling. "We pushed him away every chance we got. And now the world knows he was the one keeping us afloat." Her mother, Evelyn, said softly, "Maybe we should have welcomed him." Richard scoffed. "He hid who he was." Evelyn countered, "We never asked." Silence. The kind of silence that only follows when truth finally lands. Back in Michael's house, Lydia called with an update. The judge accepted the settlement agreement. Claire signed everything. "You're officially free." Michael sat on the couch in his quiet living room. No cheers, no dramatic sigh, just a long, steady breath. "Good," he said. "You know," Lydia added, "most people would consider losing that much money a defeat." Michael smiled faintly. Freedom is worth more than any number. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. No wife, no in-laws, no mask, no dead weight pulling on his life. Just clarity, just silence, just peace. Exactly what he'd earned. Exactly where the chapter ends. Chapter 9, Rebuilding a New Life. Michael sat at the small cafe table near the MIT Alumni Center, stirring a cup of black coffee he barely tasted. The steam curled into the crisp morning air like a reminder that life moves quietly, whether you notice it or not. Across from him, Daniel Chun leaned back in his chair, grinning like he hadn't seen the old roommate in a decade. But Michael knew Daniel had always been the kind of person who saw potential in everyone, even the ones the world dismissed. "I have to admit," Daniel said, running a hand through his messy hair, "I didn't expect to see you here, at least not like this. Everyone at the reunion thinks you vanished. Poof. Rich, invisible, gone." Michael took a sip, letting the bitterness settle in his mouth. "I was invisible by design," he said calmly. "Still am, in a lot of ways." Daniel leaned forward, eyes bright. "Yeah, but now you can actually do whatever you want. You've got the capital, the brains, and apparently, you've got the patience to let the world come to you." Michael smiled faintly. Patience, or caution. Sometimes they're the same thing. Daniel laughed. "You're serious, though. Look, I've been running this startup, and we could use someone like you on board. Not just money. Strategy, leadership, the kind that doesn't scream for attention, but still gets results. You in?" Michael considered it for a moment. He watched a young student cross the street, carrying a backpack heavier than she probably should, headphones blasting music that reminded him of nights spent coding in the dorms. The future had a familiar pulse tonight, one that didn't carry the hollow weight of a life dictated by someone else's expectations. "I'm listening," he said finally, and with that, the door to new possibilities creaked open. Meanwhile, news from the Anderson front continued to arrive like shards of ice in the mail. Bankruptcy filings for Anderson Holdings had begun circulating through industry networks, each press release punctuating the collapse of a family empire that had always seemed untouchable. Michael didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He'd already walked away from all the chaos, from the wealth, from the resentment, and even from Claire. Let the empire crumble. He had no ties left to glue it back together. Yet curiosity, that unshakable human trait, made him open one of the trustee emails late one evening. It was short, formal, and entirely transactional. Peterson Holdings, the court-appointed trustee, is offering the remaining assets of Anderson Holdings for purchase at $8 million. This includes intellectual property, contracts, and remaining real estate. Your response is required by Friday. Michael leaned back in his chair, reading the screen twice, slowly, like he was savoring the absurdity. $8 million. For the remains of a company that had once thought themselves invincible. The same people who had mocked his $300,000 investment, like it was chump change now, had nothing left but ash. He picked up his phone, thinking briefly of Daniel's words about new ventures, about strategy, about building rather than tearing down. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile reserved for people who had learned that satisfaction rarely came from revenge, but always from freedom. He typed a brief reply. "Thank you. No interest. Michael Peterson." Sent. No flourish. No note of triumph. Just a clean decision. He set the phone down and leaned back, letting the weight of choice settle comfortably on his shoulders. He had no desire to rebuild a legacy that had been poisoned by arrogance, entitlement, and ignorance. That chapter of his life was over. The next morning, Michael met Daniel again, this time in Daniel's shared office space. The startup smelled of fresh paint, faint coffee, and the electric energy of young entrepreneurs determined to disrupt their industries. Daniel waved him toward a whiteboard littered with scribbled ideas, algorithms, and diagrams of market flows. "Look at this," Daniel said, practically bouncing in place. "We've got AI, predictive tools, blockchain integration, and a logistics platform that could transform supply chains. But here's the problem. We need someone who sees the bigger picture. Someone who understands the balance between risk and patience. And someone who can stay calm when chaos erupts. That someone is you." Michael traced a finger along one of the diagrams. I've learned a lot about patience, about chaos, about people who think they're in control when they're really not. Daniel laughed. Exactly. You get it. Most people try to force control. You create it quietly. That's exactly what we need. Michael smiled faintly. All right, let's talk numbers, and roles, and responsibilities. But remember, my interest isn't in glory. It's in making something that matters. Daniel's grin widened. Good. That's perfect. That's exactly why I called you. Over the following weeks, Michael's days filled with research, strategy meetings, and quiet planning. Investors approached him, curious, intrigued, almost reverent. Old friends from MIT and the finance world reached out, pitching projects that promised more than prestige. They promised purpose. Each offer, each conversation, confirmed what he already knew. This was the life he wanted, and for the first time in years, it was a life chosen, not imposed. At the same time, news about Anderson Holdings' collapse became public fodder. Blogs, podcasts, and financial columns dissected the implosion, detailing how an anonymous backer had quietly pulled tens of millions in funding. The world speculated about his identity, and when investigative journalists connected the dots, Michael's name was revealed. Headlines splashed across news sites. Son-in-law becomes silent architect of Anderson collapse. Millionaire who walked away from marriage and fortune. Quiet power. How Michael Peterson reshaped a $50 million empire overnight. Michael read one of the articles at a cafe, finishing his espresso as the story painted him as a legend. He didn't feel vindication. He felt relief. Relief that his choices, his patience, and his principles had led him to a place where he no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. He set the paper down, looked at Daniel across the table, and said, "It's time to build something for real. Something lasting. Something that doesn't require tearing anyone down." Daniel raised his cup. To building. Michael lifted his own, silent, private toast. He had left the past behind: marriage, family, empire, wealth that came with chains. The future was quiet, expansive, and entirely his. And when the trustee called again about Anderson Holdings, he refused once more. He had no interest in buying the ruins. The revenge chapter was closed. The empire's remnants weren't his to own. He would build anew, carefully, intentionally, for the people and projects that mattered to him, not for pride, anger, or entitlement. Because Michael had learned the hardest lesson of all. True power isn't in destruction. True power is in freedom, choice, and building something meaningful from scratch. Chapter 10, Finding Purpose Beyond Wealth. Michael sat in the quiet office of the Riverside Foundation, staring at the framed photos lining the walls. Each one told a story. A shy student in a cap too large for their head, a small classroom painted in bright colors, a group of kids clutching acceptance letters from top universities. It was a far cry from the cold, high-rise boardrooms and marble-floored mansions he had grown up watching from the outside. "Mr. Peterson?" A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see Clara James, the Foundation's program coordinator, clipboard in hand, her smile warm but professional. "We've got the mentorship assignments for the new batch. You'll be meeting them personally." Michael nodded. "Good. I want to meet them, not just write checks." Clara's eyebrows rose slightly. "Most owners don't. They prefer to stay hands-off. But you're different." Michael allowed a faint smile. "I've learned the hard way that real influence isn't in money. It's in attention, effort, and presence." By mid-morning, he was standing in a classroom no larger than his old college dorm room. A group of 15 kids staring at him with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and awe. They had heard rumors about him, whispers of the mysterious man who had silently toppled a $50 million empire, but none of that mattered here. They were waiting for him to actually care about them. "Good morning," Michael said, keeping his voice low and calm. "I'm Michael Peterson. Some of you have probably heard a lot about me. Some of it's true, some of it's not. What matters is today and what you want to make of it." One boy raised his hand. "Are you rich?" His tone was blunt, innocent, unfiltered. Michael laughed softly. "Yes, but wealth doesn't matter here. What matters is what you do with your life and what you're willing to work for." Another girl, clutching a worn notebook, asked quietly, "Will you help us get into college?" Michael leaned forward slightly. "I can't do it for you, but I can guide you, show you the paths, teach you how to navigate obstacles, and be honest about what it takes. You'll still have to do the work." The students shifted in their seats, nodding, a mixture of relief and anticipation washing over the room. Weeks passed, and Michael's involvement deepened. He reviewed applications late at night, critiqued essays line by line, and even accompanied students to scholarship interviews. He taught finance workshops, time management sessions, and strategy exercises, not because it was expected, but because he saw the potential in each child, much like the mentors who had once believed in him. During one workshop, he leaned against a whiteboard as a young girl struggled to calculate compound interest. "Remember," he said gently, "numbers tell a story. If you understand them, you can tell your story better than anyone else." She looked up, eyes wide, and scribbled furiously, nodding. I think I get it now." "That's all I wanted to hear," Michael said with a small smile. Later, when the session ended, the students lingered. One boy, taller than most of the group, approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Peterson, why do you care so much?" Michael studied him for a moment. "Because someone cared about me when no one else did. I learned that attention, guidance, and patience are more valuable than any check. And because I know what it's like to be invisible." The boy's eyes softened. "I don't want to be invisible." "You won't be," Michael said firmly. "Not while I'm here." By the end of the first year, the Riverside Foundation began attracting national attention. News outlets covered the foundation's programs, highlighting students accepted into Ivy League schools, scholarships awarded, and transformative mentorship stories. Michael was rarely photographed, preferring to work behind the scenes, but his philosophy became central to the foundation's public identity. Real change requires personal investment, not just financial donations. During a board meeting, Clara James looked at Michael thoughtfully. "You've taken this further than anyone anticipated," she said. "The kids respond to you in ways we've never seen before. You don't just give money, you give them yourself." Michael tapped his fingers lightly on the polished oak table. "Money can open doors, yes, but it doesn't teach courage, resilience, or focus. The foundation exists for them to learn that the most valuable things in life are earned, not bought." One board member chimed in skeptically, "Isn't that risky? I mean, personally mentoring kids, involving yourself in so many details, that's more than a typical donor does." Michael met his gaze evenly. "Risk is necessary if the outcome matters. If I truly want to make an impact, I need to be willing to be involved, to make mistakes, and to guide them through challenges." By the second year, the foundation had doubled its outreach. Hundreds of applications poured in from across the country. Michael personally reviewed dozens each week, often spending late nights cross-referencing recommendations, testing essays, and writing thoughtful notes to applicants. One evening, as he walked home from the foundation office, his phone buzzed. A student had sent a message. "Mr. Peterson, I got into my dream school. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did." He stared at the screen for a long moment, letting the words sink in. It wasn't the first time he'd received a message like this, but each one carried the same weight, a reminder that impact could be more profound than money or fame. Michael exhaled and whispered to himself, This is better than anything I ever owned." The foundation's success caught the attention of national media, and journalists began covering it as a model for philanthropy. Features highlighted student achievements, mentorship programs, and Michael's philosophy of combining financial resources with personal guidance. The foundation became a symbol of intentional, meaningful philanthropy. During one televised interview, Michael explained to a reporter, "We don't just fund dreams, we walk beside them. The students here aren't numbers or statistics, they're people. And if you teach them to believe in themselves, to strategize, to work, and to persevere, you've given them the tools to build their own future." The interviewer nodded, impressed. "It's a rare approach. Most donors don't get this involved." Michael smiled, not arrogantly, but with quiet certainty. Because it's not about recognition, it's about results. 3 years later, Riverside Foundation had placed thousands of students in top universities, with applications doubling annually. The programs expanded into STEM mentorship, entrepreneurship workshops, and scholarships targeting the most underserved communities. Michael remained hands-on, attending events, reviewing applications, and teaching strategy sessions. For the first time in his life, Michael felt fully aligned, his wealth no longer a hidden weapon, but a tool for growth and transformation. The silent influence he had wielded for years in financial markets now found purpose in lives, futures, and possibilities. He sat at his desk one evening, reviewing a pile of acceptance letters from students across the nation, and thought back to his past. The humiliation, the marriage, the empire, the collapse. All of it had led to this quiet power, one that changed lives instead of shattering them. And he knew, finally, that this was the life he had been building all along. Chapter 11. The Unexpected Reunion. The Riverside Foundation Gala was everything Michael had imagined it would be, and nothing like the corporate affairs he'd endured in his past life. The grand ballroom was filled with muted gold lighting, elegant floral arrangements, and a soft hum of classical music mingling with quiet conversations. Hundreds of donors, mentors, and students milled about, exchanging ideas, celebrating successes, and raising glasses to the foundation's expanding impact. Michael navigated the room with ease, his posture relaxed, a small smile playing across his lips. He was a figure of quiet authority, approachable but not flashy, commanding attention not by words or wealth, but by the sheer presence of calm confidence. For the first time in years, he felt entirely at home among people who cared about his intentions rather than his status. He had just finished speaking with a young scholarship recipient, explaining how to negotiate a summer internship, when he noticed her. Claire. She stood near the edge of the ballroom, slightly apart from the crowd, a striking contrast to the carefree, privileged woman he remembered. Her hair was neatly pulled back, her dress understated yet elegant, and there was a softness in her eyes he hadn't seen before. She wasn't the woman defined by entitlement or arrogance. She was grounded, real. Her arm was looped through a man's, someone unfamiliar to him, a tall, confident figure who exuded calm stability. The man smiled warmly at Claire, whispering something that made her laugh softly. For a moment, Michael froze. He had expected resentment, awkwardness, perhaps confrontation. Instead, he saw her genuinely at ease, the weight of the past apparently lifted from her shoulders. Claire's gaze swept the room and locked onto his. Recognition flickered, accompanied by a hesitant, almost fragile smile. Michael nodded politely, raising a glass in acknowledgement, not knowing if she would approach. She did. "Michael," she said, her voice low, careful, carrying the sincerity of someone who had carried guilt for far too long. He could hear it over the background chatter and the clinking of glasses. "Claire," he replied smoothly, neutral, giving nothing away. "It's been a while." "Yes," she said, glancing briefly at the man beside her before turning back to him. I didn't expect to see you here tonight. She took a deep breath. "I just want to apologize. For everything. For never seeing you. For pretending to care, but really being blind to who you were. For allowing the marriage to be what it was instead of what it could have been." Michael studied her. There was no performance in her eyes, no attempt to manipulate, impress, or justify. Only honesty, only regret. It was disarming in its quiet authenticity. "I hear you," he said finally, his voice calm, measured. "Thank you for saying that." She exhaled softly, relief washing over her expression. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now, that I see what I missed." Michael tilted his head slightly, letting her words sink in. There was no anger here, no need for revenge. The life he had rebuilt, the foundation, the students, the purpose, it had all grounded him, given him a clarity he had never possessed in his 20s or 30s. He didn't need to hold grudges anymore. "You were different back then," he said quietly. "Different people, different priorities. I accept that, and I forgive you." Claire's eyes glistened. "Thank you," she whispered, the weight of unspoken words easing. "Really?" For a moment, neither spoke. Around them, the gala carried on, students laughing, mentors debating strategies, donors discussing grants. But in that small bubble, time seemed to pause. Her companion, sensing the pause, offered a courteous nod. Thomas, he said, extending a hand. Claire's partner. Michael shook it firmly. Michael Peterson. Nice to meet you. Thomas smiled warmly. I've heard a lot about your work with the foundation. Truly inspiring. Michael inclined his head. Thank you. It's rewarding, more than I could have imagined. Claire looked between them, a small smile touching her lips. I just wanted to say, we're in a better place now. Both of us. And I hope you're happy. Michael nodded. I am. It was true. He was happier now than he had ever been. Not because of money, not because of vindication, but because of purpose, clarity, and the life he had chosen. Michael, Claire continued softly, I don't expect anything. Just I wanted closure. And I wanted you to know I finally understand. He gave a slight nod. Closure. That's something I can give you too. We've both moved forward. I wish you well. A comfortable silence settled between them. No bitterness, no lingering resentment. Just two people acknowledging the past and choosing peace. Claire smiled faintly. I should go back. Thomas has been waiting. Michael stepped back, subtly adjusting the lapels of his jacket. Of course. Enjoy the evening. She nodded, a small laugh escaping her lips, light, genuine, unburdened. You too, Michael. Truly. As she walked away, arm in arm with Thomas, Michael watched her blend into the crowd, feeling no pull to chase, no pang of regret. The chapter of his life that had included her was complete, neatly closed, and he felt an unusual lightness in his chest. He turned back to the gala, observing students presenting their projects, donors engaging with excitement, and the energy of a foundation that had grown beyond what anyone could have imagined. He smiled to himself. Here was the life that mattered, the work that mattered, the people who mattered. For the first time in years, he felt entirely free. No past grievances, no unfinished business, only purpose, clarity, and the quiet satisfaction of a man who had learned, finally, to walk forward unburdened. He took a sip of water, listening to the murmur of conversations around him, and thought, this is exactly where I'm meant to be. The night went on. Laughter, applause, and celebration swirled around him. But Michael's mind stayed anchored in that serene certainty. He had forgiven. He had been forgiven, and life had moved forward. Claire had apologized. He had forgiven her. They parted peacefully. Chapter 12, Legacy and Quiet Power. The cameras were quiet at first. A low hum of equipment, the rustle of crew jackets, and the occasional beep of monitors filled the Riverside Foundation's main hall. Michael walked among the rows of desks, observing the students working intently on applications, essays, and projects. For them, this was just another day, but for the documentary crew, it was the climax of years of work, struggle, and transformation. A young cameraman called out softly, Mr. Peterson, we're ready when you are. Just some opening shots of you interacting with the students. Michael nodded, adjusting the collar of his simple navy jacket. Keep it natural, he said. I'm not performing. Of course, the producer replied. We want authenticity. He approached a small group of students crowded around a table, helping them understand scholarship options. Look at this, said one student, holding up a form. I never thought I'd qualify for any of these programs. Michael leaned over, scanning the page. Eligibility doesn't guarantee success, he said. Understanding what to do with opportunities does. That's where the effort comes in. Another student piped up. You really take the time to explain everything. Most donors wouldn't care. Michael smiled faintly. Most people don't understand that investing in someone is more than money. You want a return? Look at these students. Their growth, their achievements, that's the return that matters. A microphone clipped to his lapel picked up his calm tone. The crew whispered to each other excitedly. They had never seen a philanthropist so hands-on, so present, so entirely focused on the people rather than the optics. Later, Michael sat in his office, the documentary crew filming unobtrusively from the corner. Papers lay neatly across his desk, applications, letters, student portfolios. Over the years, the Riverside Foundation had grown exponentially. 12,000 applications poured in this year alone. 12,000 stories of hope, struggle, and potential, each one a testament to what intentional effort could achieve. He reflected quietly, speaking softly to the interviewer. I didn't want recognition. I didn't want headlines. I wanted to see people grow. That's real power, not money, not control, not fear, but knowing your worth, understanding your own abilities, and choosing where to invest your energy. The interviewer nodded, intrigued. So you never seek visibility? Michael shook his head. Visibility is a byproduct. True influence is quiet. It's knowing when to act, when to step back, and when to trust the people you're investing in. That's how lasting change happens. Through the office window, he watched students working on laptops, reading scholarship letters, and sharing quiet encouragement with each other. Each one reflected the ripple effect of his choices, of his philosophy. His silent investments had once collapsed a $50 million empire. Now, they were building futures. A producer asked, "Do you ever think about the past? The empire, the divorce, the conflict?" Michael paused, eyes distant. Of course, every experience matters. But the point isn't revenge, or wealth, or recognition. The point is impact. The point is using your resources, your knowledge, and your experience to create value in the lives that truly matter. He leaned back in his chair, glancing over a stack of acceptance letters. 12,000 applications. 12,000 chances to shape the future. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the hum of computers, whispered conversations, and the glow of possibility, Michael realized the lesson his life had finally taught him. Real power isn't loud, isn't flashy. It is knowing your worth, staying unseen until necessary, and investing in people who matter.